We're here at European Business Summit in Brussels. You're on one of the panels in a few minutes' time to discuss climate change. I'd like to ask a couple of questions that relate to what's been going on in the background since Copenhagen, really. Obviously, Bonn was only a few weeks ago. What sort of progress do you think has been made, and what's likely to be needed if a real agreement is going to happen in Cancun at the end of the year?
Well, I think one of the things we learned in Copenhagen is that if we're going to get to a comprehensive global response to climate change, we need to find a way to build confidence among the principal parties. And we don't have that yet. And I think Cancun will be a crucially important opportunity to build that confidence by finding ways for the countries to come together around some concrete building blocks, some major building blocks towards ultimately a comprehensive agreement. And there are several areas where that seems entirely possible. One is on RED, reduction in emissions from deforestation, where you see a lot of momentum, both donor countries and forest countries really coming together around what a global regime could look like. And I think we should expect countries to come together in a binding agreement on that by November in Cancun. A second area is finance, a third is adaptation. But there are several of these areas where, in fact, agreement should be possible and would be a crucial step forward in this very difficult negotiation.
Okay, you mentioned finance a moment ago. In Copenhagen, one of the really big issues was the transparency. If some nations are going to be providing money for the smaller nations to make the changes that are required in infrastructure and the way their economy operates, understanding and knowing that the money is being spent well is going to be very important. Do you think there's going to be possibility for movement on that? Because that seemed a real stumbling block.
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the areas where we really need to see movement in Cancun. I think what you saw in Copenhagen were sort of broad commitments to the scale of financing required, up to $100 billion a year by 2020. But now we need to see those pieces begin to be put in place, a framework for how that can work and what mechanism will be created for that funding to flow. Some real seriousness about how we develop innovative sources of funding that are reliable and robust and can assure that level of financial support ongoing through 2020. And then I think finally, as you say, some mechanism that can give all countries confidence that the financial commitments are in fact being delivered upon.
Okay. Now, let's think about the EU view of this for a moment. Obviously at Copenhagen, the European Union was almost discussing whether they should be using 30% as a target rather than 20%. In the end, we stuck with 20%. Do you think 30% is realistic? Should we be taking that leadership and really pushing forward?
I think 30% is crucial. I think it was really unfortunate that Europe decided not to make a unilateral commitment to 30% before Copenhagen or at Copenhagen, because I think that would have been a very important step towards building the confidence and trust we need to see in those negotiations and would have reaffirmed Europe's historic leadership position on this issue. And I think Europe coming together now around a unilateral commitment to 30% is very important to Europe being able to then help take these negotiations forward.
Okay, now in the EU policy circles, it seems that many people believe that 30% as a reduction target actually is very, very achievable. We shouldn't be taking it on as a target. We should actually be making it in 10 years' time. It's really there. Do you agree with that?
No, absolutely. I mean, in fact, the analysis suggests that the cost in terms of what price of carbon do you need to achieve this target, the cost of achieving 30% is about the same level as the cost of achieving 20% appeared to be 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, when the 20% target was agreed. So it's actually, things are already shifting quickly. Costs are going down, and it's clear from multiple analyses that this is a way to build jobs in this economy, create jobs in this economy, and of course to increase Europe's energy security. And so I think there are all sorts of domestic reasons to move to 30%. It's entirely doable, and it would be a very important signal in the international negotiations to help move them forward.
So one last question then, thinking about the potential for leadership in Cancun when, in a few months' time when we get to the Mexican negotiations. In Copenhagen, there wasn't really the leadership there, which is why when Barack Obama arrived and made his initial statements, suddenly everybody almost tried to move behind him. And the EU seemed to have dropped the ball. Can the EU take it up next time and really push forward and be the leaders in this?
Well, I think we need to see leadership from Europe in this. I think they can. I think a 30% unilateral commitment would really propel them back into that kind of position and be a very strong place from which to help make an agreement happen.